A little girl thought she was just sharing cake with a lonely old man, but by morning, the police were knocking on her door, and what they revealed would change her life forever. It started with one small act of kindness at a quiet restaurant and ended with a letter, a funeral, and a secret so big it would shake an entire community. The warm glow of the setting sun stretched across the small neighborhood, casting long amber streaks on the pavement as James and his daughter Leila walked hand in hand toward Mama Rosa's restaurant. It was their ritual, this Friday night dinner, a little island of comfort at the end of a long week. The air was fragrant with the scent of simmering tomato sauce and fresh bread, and Leila's curls bounced with every excited step. "Daddy," she said, tugging at his arm, "do you think Mama Rosa made garlic knots tonight, the really soft ones?" James smiled, glancing down at her eager face. "If I know Mama Rosa, she made them just for you, and maybe a few for me." When they stepped inside, the familiar warmth enveloped them, the clatter of cutlery, the low hum of conversation, and the rich, savory aroma that always seemed to wrap around the heart. Mama Rosa herself greeted them, wiping her flour-dusted hands on her apron. "James, Leila, your table is ready," she said, her Italian accent lilting like music. Leila beamed at her and asked the question that had been waiting on the tip of her tongue. "Did you make the garlic knots?" "Of course, mia cara," Mama Rosa said with a wink. "I know my favorite customers." She led them to their usual booth in the corner, where Leila slid into her seat with her legs swinging, barely able to sit still. James settled opposite her, watching with quiet amusement as she immediately launched into a story about her day at school, about caterpillars and cocoons and how butterflies are basically magic in real life. James nodded, listening intently, letting her words fill the air. But as she spoke, a quiet movement at the far end of the restaurant caught his eye. An elderly man had just been seated at a small table near the window. His jacket was neat but worn at the edges, his white hair carefully combed. There was something fragile about him, as though time itself had been chipping away at his spirit. Leila followed her father's gaze and saw him too. She went still for a moment, her bright chatter fading. The man's face was lined and weary, and when Mama Rosa approached with a small cupcake, lighting a single candle before setting it in front of him, something inside Leila's chest squeezed tight. He smiled politely, nodded his thanks, and blew out the candle in one soft puff, but his shoulders slumped as though the moment weighed more than it lifted. "Daddy," Leila whispered, her voice barely audible over the gentle hum of the restaurant. "Why is he all alone on his birthday?" James hesitated, glancing back at the man, then at his daughter's worried face. "I don't know, sweet pea. Sometimes people get older and don't have many friends or family around anymore." Leila's brow furrowed as she stared at the man across the room. "But nobody should be alone on their birthday," she said with quiet determination. "Can we go talk to him? Please?" James felt a swell of pride at her compassion. He caught Mama Rosa's eye and gestured her over, quietly asking if it would be all right. Mama Rosa's face softened. "Oh, bless you," she said, touching her chest. "Mr. Thompson has been coming here for years. He is a good man, but very quiet. He will be happy to have company." With Mama Rosa's blessing, James and Leila crossed the room. Mr. Thompson looked up, surprise flickering in his pale blue eyes. "Excuse me," James said gently. "My daughter heard it was your birthday. She wanted to wish you a happy one." Leila, suddenly shy but resolute, stepped forward. "Happy birthday, Mr. Thompson," the old man supplied, a slow, genuine smile breaking over his face. "Arthur Thompson." "Happy birthday, Mr. Thompson," Leila said, her voice gaining confidence. "Would you like some company? We could sing to you." For a moment, the old man just blinked at her, as though unsure what to say. Then he chuckled, a warm, rusty sound that seemed to shake off some of the loneliness clinging to him. "I would like that very much." James pulled up a chair for Leila, and soon they were all laughing together. Mr. Thompson told her about his childhood adventures, about teaching children her age long ago, about the chocolate cake his mother used to bake every year for his birthday. Leila listened with wide eyes, peppering him with questions, and every answer seemed to put a little more light back in the man's face. When Mama Rosa appeared with a small chocolate cake, just in case, Mr. Thompson's hands trembled as he blew out the candle. Around them, other diners clapped softly, and for a few moments the whole restaurant seemed to share in his celebration. As they prepared to leave, Mr. Thompson rose slowly and took Leila's small hand in his own. "Thank you," he said, his voice quiet but full of something that made James's throat tighten. "You've given me the best birthday I've had in years." Leila grinned up at him, chocolate smudged on her chin. "You're welcome, Mr. Thompson. Maybe next year we can make you a cake at home." James felt something stir deep inside him at the look that crossed the old man's face. Gratitude, yes, but something heavier too. As they stepped out into the cool night air, James glanced back through the window. Mr. Thompson was still standing at the table, watching them go, his smile soft and wistful, as though he knew this night would mean more than they could possibly imagine. The smell of pancakes filled the kitchen the next morning, warm and comforting, a perfect Saturday ritual. James flipped the last pancake onto a plate and smiled as Leila bounded into the room, her hair still a tangle of curls from sleep, her stuffed elephant tucked under one arm. "Morning, Daddy," she chirped, climbing onto her chair. "Did you put extra chocolate chips in this time?" "Extra for my best girl," James said with a wink, setting the plate before her. Leila grinned and dug in, her small legs swinging under the table as if the world held nothing but light and syrup. The memory of last night still clung to them, sweet and warm. "Daddy," she said through a mouthful of pancake, "do you think Mr. Thompson had fun with us? He smiled so big when we sang to him." James's heart softened. "I think you made his whole birthday, sweetheart. I haven't seen anyone that happy in a long time." Leila beamed, proud of herself. "Maybe we can sit with him again next Friday." But before James could answer, a sharp, deliberate knock rattled the apartment door. The sound cut through the cozy morning like a crack of thunder. James froze mid-reach for his coffee mug, his brows knitting. It was too early for visitors, and no one ever knocked like that unless it was urgent. He wiped his hands on a dish towel, his chest tightening with unease. "Stay here, sweet pea," he murmured and crossed to the door. When he swung it open, two uniformed police officers stood in the hallway. The taller one was broad-shouldered, his expression unreadable, while the shorter officer, a woman with kind, searching eyes, gave a polite nod. "Good morning, sir," the man said, his voice calm but deep. "Are you James Wilson?" "Yes," James said, his protective instincts flaring as he stepped slightly into the doorway, blocking their view of the kitchen. "Is something wrong?" "We're here to ask a few questions about an elderly man named Arthur Thompson," the woman said gently. "May we come in?" James felt his stomach twist. Mr. Thompson, the birthday, the cupcake. He stepped aside reluctantly, calling over his shoulder, "Leila, honey, why don't you bring your breakfast into the living room?" Leila appeared, clutching her plate with both hands. Her wide eyes flicked between the officers and her father. "Daddy, what's happening?" James forced a reassuring smile. "It's okay, sweet pea. These officers just want to talk to us for a minute." Once they were seated in the living room, the officers exchanged a brief look. "We understand that you and your daughter were with Mr. Thompson at Mama Rose's restaurant last night," the tall officer began. "That's right," James said slowly. "He was celebrating his birthday alone, so we joined him." Leila nodded eagerly, her voice small but clear. "We sang happy birthday to him and had cake. He told me about when he was a teacher." Officer Chin, the woman, gave her a soft smile. "That was very kind of you, Leila. You gave him a wonderful evening." Leila's face lit with pride for a moment, but then Officer Johnson's expression turned grave. "I'm sorry to tell you this," he said, "but Mr. Thompson was found unresponsive in his home late last night." The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and final. James felt the breath leave his chest. "Unresponsive?" He chewed. "He passed away sometime during the night," Officer Chin said gently. "The paramedics tried, but there was nothing they could do." Leila's fork clattered onto her plate, her eyes filling with tears. "You mean he died?" "Yes, sweetheart," Officer Chin said softly. Leila's small body crumpled against James's side. "But he was happy last night," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Did I do something wrong? Did I make him sick?" James wrapped his arms around her, his throat tight. "No, sweet pea, you didn't do anything wrong." Officer Chin leaned forward, her tone reassuring. "Quite the opposite. From what we know, you gave him one of the happiest nights he's had in years. That's a beautiful gift." James nodded, his heart aching as he kissed the top of Leila's head. "Why do you need to talk to us?" he asked, trying to steady his voice. Officer Johnson glanced down at his notepad. "You and your daughter were likely the last people to see him alive. We're just gathering information to help us understand his final hours. Did he mention anyone he planned to see after dinner? Any friends or relatives?" James shook his head. "No, he mostly told stories about when he was young. He didn't say anything about family." Leila sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "He said he hadn't had a birthday like that in a long time." The officers jotted down a few more notes. The air in the room felt heavy, as though even the walls were listening. "Thank you," Officer Chin said at last. "You've both been very helpful. We may follow up once the coroner's report comes back." James walked them to the door. As Officer Johnson stepped into the hall, he paused and said quietly, "Mr. Wilson, I know this is hard, but your daughter should know. She made that man's last night special. That's something she can be proud of." James nodded, feeling the weight of the morning pressing down on him. When he turned back to the living room, Leila was still sitting on the couch, her pancake untouched. "Daddy," she said, her voice so small it nearly broke him, "why did Mr. Thompson have to die?" James knelt in front of her, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I don't know, baby. But I do know that because of you, he wasn't sad when it happened. You made his last birthday happy." Leila leaned into him, her small arms wrapping around his neck. "I wish we could have more birthdays with him." James held her tight, staring over her shoulder at the door the officers had just closed. A chill ran down his spine. Something about their questions, about the way they had looked at each other before leaving, gnawed at him. This wasn't over. The rest of the morning passed like a slow-moving storm. The pancakes went cold, untouched on the table, the smell of them heavy in the air like a memory that wouldn't fade. Leila sat curled up on the couch with her stuffed elephant pressed tight against her chest, staring at the floor as though answers might appear there if she looked long enough. James moved quietly through the apartment, tidying up, wiping counters that didn't need wiping, all to keep his own rising emotions from spilling over. Every so often he glanced at Leila, aching to fix what he couldn't. The knock at the door had changed. Everything. By midday, word had spread through the building. In a place where neighbors usually kept to themselves, now they were peeking out of doors, murmuring in the hallway, leaving texts on James's phone. Mrs. Gonzalez, their kind-hearted neighbor from across the hall, came by with a plate of warm cookies and an expression of deep concern. "Oh, James," she said softly, stepping inside. "I heard about Mr. Thompson, such a good man. Always so polite, so quiet. We'll miss him." Leila peeked out from behind the couch, her eyes puffy. "He told me about the chocolate cake his mom used to make," she whispered. "We sang to him, and he smiled." Mrs. Gonzalez knelt down, her joints creaking, and cupped Leila's face in her hands. "Then you gave him a gift, mi amor. He left this world happy. That is no small thing." The words offered comfort, but they didn't dissolve the heaviness that lingered in the apartment. James found himself pacing. Something about the officer's visit kept replaying in his mind, the way they exchanged glances before leaving, the way Officer Johnson's hand tightened on his notepad. By early afternoon, the tension in the building had grown thick enough to cut. James's phone buzzed with a message from Tom, the neighbor down the hall. "Community room at 3. We're meeting about Mr. Thompson. You should come." James hesitated. Part of him wanted to stay home, to protect Leila from any more talk of death, but another part of him needed to know what the neighbors were saying, what they suspected. "Sweet pea," James said gently, crouching beside the couch. "Would it be okay if I went to talk with some of the neighbors for a little while? Mrs. Gonzalez will stay here with you." Leila nodded, still subdued but willing, and Mrs. Gonzalez promised to bake more cookies with her. James kissed the top of his daughter's head before stepping out into the hallway. The community room was already half full when he arrived. A low murmur of conversation buzzed like static in the air. When James walked in, the chatter quieted, and heads turned toward him with something between sympathy and curiosity. Tom, a stocky man with salt and pepper hair, gestured James over. "Glad you could make it," he said, his voice low. "People are worried. Some say the cops wouldn't have come knocking unless there was something unusual." James swallowed hard, taking a seat as Mrs. Peterson, an elderly woman from the 5th floor, spoke up. "I just don't understand," she said, wringing her hands. "He seemed fine yesterday. He always waved to me in the hallway. Why would the police need to talk to a little girl about it? They just needed to know what happened last night," James said, his voice steady but carrying an edge of defensiveness. "We were probably the last people to see him alive." A hush fell over the room. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then someone near the back said quietly, "I heard the paramedics were called around midnight. Lights flashing, sirens. But no ambulance took him away." James felt a chill creep up his spine. Midnight. Hours after they had left him smiling over chocolate cake. The conversation turned into a mixture of speculation and concern. Some neighbors worried about the safety of the building, others about the loneliness that could haunt someone like Mr. Thompson. "This is a wake-up call," Tom said finally, standing up to address the group. "We have to do better. We have seniors in this building who might be sitting alone just like Mr. Thompson was, night after night. That's not right. We need to look out for each other." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, but James only half heard them. His mind was stuck on the image of Mr. Thompson's pale blue eyes, the gratitude in his smile, the quiet heaviness he carried with him even as he laughed at Leila's questions. When the meeting broke up, neighbors stopped James to offer condolences and to praise Leila's kindness. "You've raised a remarkable little girl," Mrs. Peterson said, patting James's arm. "She's got a heart of gold." James thanked her, but his mind was still spinning as he made his way back to the apartment. When he stepped inside, the air smelled of fresh-baked cookies. Leila was sitting at the table, icing them with concentration, her tongue sticking out in determination. She looked up at him with a small, tentative smile. "Daddy, we made smiley faces," she said, holding up one lopsided but cheerful cookie. James forced a smile and sat down beside her, letting the warmth of the moment steady him. But deep inside, the unease remained, whispering like a shadow. Something about Mr. Thompson's last night, and the way the police had handled it, didn't feel finished. 3 days passed, but the sense of waiting did not leave James or Leila. The apartment felt different now, quieter, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. James noticed how Leila had grown unusually thoughtful, doodling less, asking more questions about life and death that no parent ever feels ready to answer. It was late Wednesday afternoon when another knock came at the door. This time it wasn't sharp and official like before. It was softer, almost polite. James opened it to find the same 2 officers standing there, but their faces were gentler now, no longer guarded with suspicion. "Mr. Wilson," Officer Chin said, her tone warm, "we wanted to stop by and share some updates with you and your daughter. May we come in?" James stepped aside, calling gently for Leila. She appeared from her room, her stuffed elephant still tucked under one arm. She hesitated at first, but when she saw Officer Chin's kind smile, she came closer, clutching James's hand. They all sat in the living room, sunlight streaming in through the blinds, casting pale stripes across the carpet. "We received the coroner's report," Officer Johnson began, his voice calm. "Mr. Thompson passed away peacefully in his sleep. There was no sign of foul play, no pain. He simply didn't wake up." James let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Leila's little shoulders relaxed slightly, though her eyes still shimmered with tears. "But there's more we wanted to tell you," Officer Chin said, leaning forward, her expression softening. "We spoke with Mr. Thompson's housekeeper. She told us that when she saw him the next morning, she found him with a framed photograph of his family on the nightstand, something she said she hadn't seen there in years, and she said he was smiling." Leila's breath caught. "He was smiling?" she whispered. "Yes," Officer Chin nodded. "She said he wouldn't stop talking about a sweet little girl who had made his birthday the happiest he'd had in a very long time." Leila's lip trembled, but this time the tears that fell were warm, not just sad. "And there's one more thing," Officer Johnson added, reaching into a folder and producing a crisp envelope. "Mr. Thompson left instructions with his lawyer to contact you immediately after his passing. His attorney has asked to meet with you both today." James blinked in surprise, his pulse quickening. "He left instructions for us?" "Yes," Officer Johnson confirmed. "He wanted to make sure your daughter received something very important." The words settled in the room like a riddle waiting to be solved. An hour later, James and Leila found themselves in a quiet wood-paneled office downtown. The smell of leather and paper hung in the air. Mr. Goldstein, a kindly man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, greeted them with a solemn nod. "You must be Leila," he said, smiling softly as he shook her small hand. "Mr. Thompson spoke very highly of you. Please, sit." They settled into the plush chairs across from his desk. Mr. Goldstein opened a folder and drew out a handwritten letter, its edges trembling slightly as he held it. "This is for you," he said, looking at Leila. "Would you like me to read it aloud?" Leila nodded, wide-eyed, her fingers twisting the hem of her dress. Mr. Goldstein cleared his throat and began to read. "Dear Leila, if you are hearing this, it means my journey on this earth has come to an end. But please don't be sad. Thanks to you, my final birthday was filled with more joy than I've known in years. You see, I lost my wife, my daughter, and my granddaughter a long time ago. Their loss left me broken, and I chose to spend my days quietly, away from the world. Birthdays became just another day to survive, until you came along and reminded me of what it felt like to be seen. Your kindness reminded me of my granddaughter. She would be about your age now. You made me feel like I wasn't invisible anymore. For that, I will be forever grateful. I have arranged for a small trust to be set up in your name. It will cover your education and provide you with the means to help others if you choose. My only wish is that you keep being who you are. Keep seeing the people the world forgets. Thank you, Leila, for giving me the gift of leaving this world with hope instead of loneliness. With love, your friend, Arthur Thompson. By the time Mr. Goldstein finished, tears were streaming down Leila's cheeks. James swallowed hard, struggling to keep his composure as he reached over to squeeze her hand. "This trust will ensure that Leila's education is fully funded," Mr. Goldstein explained gently. "And there is a modest stipend attached, should she wish to use it for charitable causes when she's older." Mr. Thompson wanted his gratitude to last far beyond this day. James felt overwhelmed, torn between gratitude and disbelief. "Please tell me, how do we even begin to thank him for this?" Mr. Goldstein smiled softly, his eyes glistening. "You already have. You gave him peace. That was all he ever wanted." When they left the office, the city felt strangely brighter, as if the world itself had tilted just slightly. Leila clutched the letter to her chest, her face streaked with dried tears, but her eyes shining with something fierce and new. "Daddy," she said quietly as they stood on the sidewalk, "I want to use the money to help people, just like Mr. Thompson did." James knelt so that he was eye level with her, his throat tight with emotion. "We will, sweet pea," he promised. "We'll make sure his kindness keeps going, for a long, long time." As they walked home together, the city lights flickered on one by one, and James had the strange, unshakable feeling that Mr. Thompson was somehow still with them, smiling just as he had that night over the small chocolate cake. The days that followed felt like living inside a story the whole city was suddenly reading. The local news ran a segment about the little girl who turned a lonely man's last birthday into a celebration. Cameras appeared in the neighborhood, capturing shots of Mama Rosa's restaurant, the apartment building, even the park where Mr. Thompson used to sit. Leila became something of a quiet celebrity. Strangers sent letters and cards thanking her for reminding them to reach out to the lonely people in their own lives. Teachers at her school used her story as a lesson in compassion, and classmates began stopping her in the hallways just to say hello. But along with the attention came an unshakable sense of responsibility that settled on James's shoulders. Mr. Thompson's letter wasn't just a gift, it was a charge, a request to make something bigger grow out of one night of kindness. One chilly Saturday morning, James and Leila walked down to the park where the old oak tree stood, the place Mr. Thompson had once told them he liked to read when the world felt too heavy. The tree's branches swayed gently, whispering in the wind like a voice only the two of them could hear. "Daddy," Leila said suddenly, stopping mid-path. "What if we plant a new tree? One just for Mr. Thompson so people remember him. And maybe every time someone sits under it, they'll think about being kind too." James looked down at his daughter, his heart swelling with pride. "That's a beautiful idea, sweet pea, and we'll make sure everyone knows why it's here." They took the idea to the neighborhood council, and soon the plan began to grow roots of its own. The Parks Department approved the memorial planting, and word spread quickly. By the day of the ceremony, a crowd had gathered. Neighbors, school teachers, even some of Mr. Thompson's former students who had seen the story on the news and come to pay their respects. The air was crisp, the sky a brilliant blue as the workers carefully lowered a young oak sapling into the hole prepared for it. Leila stood with a small envelope in her hand, her face pale with nerves but her chin lifted with determination. "Would you like to say a few words, Leila?" the mayor asked, his voice gentle. Leila nodded, stepping forward. The entire park seemed to fall silent, the rustle of leaves and distant city sounds dimming. She unfolded the piece of paper with care, and her voice, small but clear, rang out across the gathering. "Dear Mr. Thompson," she read, her hands trembling only slightly, "we are planting this tree for you today. Daddy says trees are like people. They start small, but if you take care of them, they grow big and strong. Your kindness was like a seed, Mr. Thompson. It started small when we shared your birthday dinner, but now it's growing bigger and touching so many people. I promise to take care of this tree and to keep spreading kindness just like you taught me." By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the park. Even Officer Johnson, standing in the back, discreetly wiped at his eyes. James placed a steady hand on his daughter's shoulder as they both took turns helping to cover the roots with soil. But what happened next was something neither of them could have anticipated. As the crowd lingered, talking quietly, an older man stepped forward, tall, well-dressed, and carrying a weathered leather briefcase. He introduced himself as one of the trustees of a philanthropic foundation that Mr. Thompson had funded anonymously for years. "You should know," he said to James and Leila, his voice deep with emotion. "Arthur Thompson didn't just teach children, he changed lives. He has paid for hundreds of scholarships, supported libraries, and built programs for underprivileged schools. Until now, he always asked to remain unnamed. But this," the man gestured toward the tree and the gathered crowd, This is what he always hoped for, a legacy that would inspire others to keep going. A murmur ran through the crowd. People were stunned. Some had assumed Mr. Thompson was simply a quiet man who kept to himself, not someone who had been quietly shaping the future of countless children for decades. Leila's small fingers tightened around James's hand. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "He was a hero." "Yes," James said softly, his throat tight. "And now it's our turn to carry that forward." In the weeks that followed, the idea spread like wildfire. Neighbors started a birthday buddy program at Mama Rosa's so no one would ever have to celebrate alone again. Mrs. Peterson organized weekly tea socials for the seniors in the building, while Mr. Ramirez, the superintendent, began checking in on elderly tenants who lived by themselves. James took a bold step and asked his employer for a 6-month sabbatical so he could work on growing these initiatives, and for the first time in years, he felt like he was living with real purpose. One evening, as he and Leila sat at the kitchen table surrounded by notebooks and scribbled plans, James looked at his daughter, who was carefully sketching ideas for a kindness club at school. "You know," he said quietly, "you've done more than just make one man happy. You've changed this whole neighborhood." Leila smiled, her eyes shining. "We just started it, Daddy. Now everyone else is helping it grow. It's like planting a whole forest." James leaned back, staring at his daughter with wonder. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something even bigger, that Mr. Thompson's story was only the first ripple in a wave that would touch lives they hadn't even met yet. And somewhere, he thought, maybe Mr. Thompson knew. The seasons passed, and the young oak tree they planted grew strong and tall, its branches stretching toward the sky as if carrying Mr. Thompson's memory upward with them. By the time Leila turned 12, the park had become a gathering place every year on his birthday. Families brought cupcakes, children played near the fountain, and neighbors swapped stories about kindness they had given or received. But this year, things felt different. Leila stood a little taller now, her curls tied back, her voice carrying more confidence than ever. James watched her from a short distance, his heart swelling. She was no longer just the little girl who sat with a lonely old man. She was becoming something more, a leader, a voice for something bigger than herself. The mayor's office had organized a dedication ceremony, and this time, the entire city council was present. News crews lined the park with cameras, and an even larger crowd had gathered. The fountain had been polished until it gleamed, the Thompson-Wilson plaque shining in the sunlight. James took Leila's hand as they walked to the front. She didn't tremble this time. She stood proudly, shoulders squared, holding the same letter Mr. Thompson had left for her years before. "Thank you all for coming," the mayor began, his deep voice carrying across the park. "We are here to celebrate the continuing legacy of a man who quietly gave so much to our city, and the little girl whose compassion sparked a movement of kindness that is still growing." Leila stepped forward, and for a moment, the entire park seemed to hold its breath. "When I first met Mr. Thompson," she began, her voice clear and steady, "he was sitting alone at Mama Rosa's with just a cupcake and a candle. I didn't know him, but I knew that no one should be alone on their birthday, so we sat with him, we sang to him, and that night changed everything." She paused, looking out at the faces before her, neighbors, city officials, strangers holding small children, and continued, her words stronger now. "Since that day, we've planted this tree, we've started clubs, we've fed children who were hungry, and we've made sure no one in our neighborhood has to celebrate alone again. And now..." She held up the letter for a moment before lowering it, her voice softening. "Now I want everyone to know that this is just the beginning." The crowd erupted in applause, but before it could die down, the trustee from Mr. Thompson's foundation, the tall man with the leather briefcase, stepped forward with a gravitas that silenced the park once again. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice solemn but charged with energy, "on behalf of the Thompson Foundation, I am proud to announce that this year, we are officially naming Leila Wilson as the youngest honorary chairperson in the history of the foundation." A stunned murmur swept through the crowd. James felt his throat tighten as he looked down at his daughter, whose eyes had widened but whose smile was radiant. "She will not only help guide the foundation's charitable efforts," the trustee continued, "but we are also establishing a new initiative in her name, the Leila Wilson Kindness Grant, funding community projects designed by children and teens to help others." Gasps turned into cheers. The mayor clapped. Mama Rosa wiped her eyes with her apron, and even Officer Johnson, who stood in the back of the crowd, gave a proud nod. Leila turned to her father, her expression glowing with a mixture of disbelief and determination. "Daddy," she whispered, "he's letting me finish what he started." James knelt down, his voice husky with emotion. No, sweet pea. You're starting something new. Something even bigger. When the applause finally died down, Leila stepped to the podium once more, the weight of the moment pressing on her shoulders but not crushing her. I promise, she said, her voice ringing out clear and strong, to keep doing what Mr. Thompson taught me, to see the people who feel invisible, to sit with them, to listen, to remind them that they matter. This isn't just Mr. Thompson's legacy, this is all of ours. The crowd rose to its feet, clapping and cheering, some wiping tears from their eyes. And as James looked around, he realized that this wasn't just a ceremony. It was a turning point. The whole city seemed to have been touched by a wave of purpose. Later, as the sun dipped low in the sky and the crowd slowly dispersed, James and Leila walked back to the oak tree. Its branches rustled gently in the evening breeze. Leila knelt down and placed her hand against its trunk, whispering softly, "We did it, Mr. Thompson, and we're just getting started." James stood back, watching her, the glow of the setting sun framing her silhouette. In that moment, he saw not just his daughter but the future. A future where kindness was no longer just a single act, but a way of life, spreading like ripples across a pond, touching lives they hadn't even met yet. And somewhere, he imagined, Arthur Thompson was smiling,